Welcome into Nuclear Heat. This is our weekly wrestling podcast here on 93.7 The Ticket. I'm Jake Balkovin alongside Augie Pena, and we are back for some more wrestling talk. It has been a while since we've done a show, but we're back, and we're excited because the Royal Rumble has just taken place, which means in wrestling terms, we're on the road to WrestleMania. The Royal Rumble, if you don't know, is my favorite event. It is absolutely exciting. I will say the one thing about it is that I always get more excited for the potential of what could happen than what actually does, but it is always exciting regardless because it is set up in a 30 men, 30 women Royal Rumble. They do it on both sides, and the winner of that Royal Rumble will headline WrestleMania. That's why we call it the Road to WrestleMania. So it's just a very exciting time in wrestling. Aside from some very interesting stories that are going on in the wrestling business as well with WWE and Vince McMahon, who has left. We've got Netflix now buying in, so WWE and Raw specifically soon. And 2025 will be going to streaming only. So a lot of things to break down and talk about, but mostly we just reviewed the shows. Maybe we'll have time for that extra stuff a little bit later. But we do have Royal Rumble and Raw, obviously, to go over this week. Augie, first of all, let me ask you, how's the wrestling been? How are you feeling in general about the road to WrestleMania season starting?
It's fun. Just like as you, the Royal Rumble is one of my favorite events. I love it. It's a fun time. They got some good storylines going here. They got some okay storylines where they're just kind of throwing people together. But I think it's good, and I think this Royal Rumble I think was a pretty decent show. Had some great times. And it's fun to see some of these guys in the direction they're going for WrestleMania there.
Yeah, and obviously we're all. Well, this show is not a one that we have to hide behind the fact that it is predetermined. We understand that in the whole thing, but what makes wrestling interesting, if you kind of break it down from a business perspective, is those matchups. What's going to draw the money? What's the most interesting? What's getting the crowds going? And then something that we're seeing coming into play now with CM Punk, which is injuries, and I guess what we're seeing with Brock Lesnar, outside distractions that can come in and really change up a WrestleMania season. That's why I say, the funnest thing to do is sit back and fantasy book. And that's basically what our show's about. And we can have some fun with it. But it's very hard as a business to run it out that way because things are constantly happening. Just a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago at this time, I would have told you, I think that Gunther was going to face Brock Lesnar, maybe Seth Rollins. Mm-hmm. Now, both those possibilities are up in the air, but not necessarily guaranteed. And then, the same thing kind of with CM Punk. He was an absolute draw for WrestleMania. The Royal Rumble was his first televised match in WWE in 10 years. This isn't something that you can just rewrite. This is what they've been waiting for. You can't rewrite a 10-year storyline. So it is very disheartening that he is going to be out of it. And we could talk about what kind of went on through that Rumble match in general. And so let's go ahead and get into it. Just had to preface it with a little bit of fun because I just get so excited about these storylines. The Royal Rumble opened up with Pat McAfee joining the broadcast booth. We can save this for later because this was in Raw, but they announced last night that he would be a permanent fixture now on Raw, which is, again, I think another good way. They got to do everything they can, whether it be to draw in The Rock or get Pat McAfee to get these big names in the news to counteract some of the Vince McMahon stuff that's going to be in the news. So Pat McAfee joining Raw will be absolutely fantastic, and joining for the Rumble is cool too. I don't know if I asked you before, because I say this with Cody, and we'll get to him in a second too, but I say I don't quite get it. I understand that there isn't it, and people love it, and people love him, and I don't quite get it, even though I understand all what goes into it. Pat McAfee is kind of the same thing to me, and I work here at a sports station at 93.7 The Ticket, and I understand that I understand the former player and the entertainment aspect thing, and I think he's great for wrestling for the outside, and he's a good wrestler. He's like a good in-ring performer, so I in no way dislike Pat McAfee, but I will say I don't quite get it, but one way or the other, he draws eyes to wrestling.
Yeah, and see, this is where we differ a little bit, and this is where I differ on the Cody and Pat, because I love Pat McAfee in the WWE. I think he is entertainment. He's great. As you said, he brings a crowd with him. He's hilarious. He is very athletic. I do listen to his show every day as well. So I'm kind of a fan there. And I think he brings like that real audience. He's like from our point of view and everything. Because You have, you know, the Michael Coles and you have the former wrestlers and everything. And yeah, he's a pro athlete as well, but you can tell he's just having fun. You know, he's out there kind of, a lot of what he does is unscripted. You know, if you watch, you know, even his show, you know, they cuss,
I've
you know,
noticed.
you know, they say stuff, they kind of do whatever they want and they're going to get away with it. And I think people love that because he does that. You know, you never know. His stuff doesn't feel as scripted as like a Michael Cole, like I said, or something like that. You know, he says the most ridiculous things, you know, out there. Like, you know, he'll bring his catchphrases, you know, he'll catch, you know, Corey Graves and Michael Cole off, you know, because he says something. And I think that's hilarious and it's great. You know, it brings that real, as we've talked about, you know, WWE is scripted, you know, it's all predicted. He brings that like real reaction, like our reaction to thing. And that's kind of what I feel is like a big draw from him in there too, and I love that.
I think you're right. I think he is. I think that's a good way of putting kind of a voice for the fan. Now, I will say this to open up. They've been kind of messing in with his theme music. I think they've had some new one, and that was kind of a problem in this Rumble altogether to me. Was unrecognizable theme music. They had that with Pat McAfee too. So when it kicks off the show, and you're like, I just love hearing music, and then you go, oh my gosh, he's here.
Yep.
I heard music and I was going, I don't recognize that. Yep. Who is that? And then you see it's Pat McAfee and you're happy to go with it. But the Royal Rumble then would kick off with the Women's Royal Rumble. Very fascinating one. We were talking about this off air. I think both of us agree the Women's Royal Rumble was better than the men's, but it went in this order. So we will talk about it first. They started off with some big returns. Naomi specifically returning, Natalya being number one. And this is the fun thing about the Royal Rumble. Well, that's what some of my favorites too, is you can like break down the positions in which people go in. And so I thought Natalya as the number one. I don't have too much interest in it. They're always somewhat, I feel, pushing her a little bit onto me because of the Hart family. But she's a longtime WWE fixture, so I guess I knew she was going to be in. But I like a 1 versus 2 that gets you this let's go, and that didn't quite do it to me. So again, just for my initial feel of what am I hearing? Because the Royal Rumble is all about hearing stuff and then reacting. I have unrecognizable Pat McAfee music followed by Natalya. But thankfully, the Naomi music hits, and then you're thinking, oh, I think that's her.
Yep.
And she does come out, and so that was very interesting. Jordynne Grace soon followed. This was a new thing, I think, to the Royal Rumble, was the TNA champ. And she very much held herself throughout the match. And so, I mean, I there's lots of other spots that we can think of that were pretty interesting, but I think the biggest thing to me coming out of this before we get to the winner was Jade Cargill finally making her debut, and she looks fantastic. She looks like the next big star, just like everybody had been touting her, and there had been talks about how to debut her. Do you put her in NXT? What did you think about this debut? Because she didn't win. We'll get to that in a second as well, but she did have a very impressive showing, including getting out the bully of the Rumble and Nia Jax, and made it all the way down to the final 3. Granted, she was like 27th or something coming in, but still had the square off with Bianca. So, just kind of all those things considered, do you think that this was the way to bring her into the WWE, and what would you do with her next?
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I was going to point out the fact that she cleanly, single-handedly threw out Nia Jax. I thought that, because you watched before, there was like 10 women trying to, put her over, and, Jay just throws her like that. But I thought it was great. The only thing I would have done was I would have maybe entered her, and it was a good showcase, because it showed like, what she can do and everything. But I felt with her big surprise over who was actually the number 30, if you would have put Jade at the number 30 spot, I feel like that would have, less of a showcase for her, but I feel like the fan reaction would have been huge. It's like, okay, finally somebody we're really waiting for at 30.
Yes.
So that would have been the only thing, but man, I thought she looked phenomenal. I mean, she was manhandling people. I would assume that she is going to go into a big feud with Bianca Belair here soon. They kind of look like they could be related too there,
both very muscular,
very. I actually I looked it up. I'm like, gotta make sure they're not actually related. They look very similar on there, but I thought Jade did an amazing job, man. She's gonna be a star.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because she's been with a bunch of promotions. Like I think she was just with AEW, right? And then came over.
Yep.
And things like that. So the fact that they just kind of let her go to the WWE and now they have her to bring life to this women's division, which I wouldn't say is lacking because it's got top stars, but now it's got somebody that I think can be a real threat to, the Rheas, the the other contenders.
Well, and especially for Bianca Belair, because I do think that's where the money feud is. I think that should be WrestleMania. And Bianca, to me, her character is just kind of stale. So when you can they can get away with keeping her the same character with a fresh opponent. And they could do that with so many different women. For Jade Cargill, her presence on the roster as somebody that's immediately viable and immediately believable. You can run her through everybody. Liv Morgan. I mean, everybody can get their shot at her. And so for the next year and a half, you just have fresh matchups with Jade Cargill, and I can't wait for it. Now, I do agree with you too. The 30th entry, which is a long talked about thing because, like you said, everybody's kind of waiting. That's your last chance to get the star that you want in the Royal Rumble. Ended up being Liv Morgan, who had been gone away for a while. Good star. I think she was second in the Rumble as far as last year, and then losing to Rhea Ripley, and then this year being number 30. She did last till the end too. But would have been a very strange. I mean, and she's got star status, but I'll do the same thing with the men's Royal Rumble. I'm gonna be honest. I was hoping for Mercedes Moné.
Yeah, I think everybody.
Or in WWE terms, Sasha Banks, and so a little bit deflating. And then when she was in the final three with Jade Cargill and Bayley, who was the eventual winner, I didn't feel her as believable. And I mean, if they did do it, it would have been a surprise, but not necessarily earned because she hadn't been here for a while. So I didn't necessarily see her as viable anytime coming back. It was just kind of like, okay, she's back.
Yeah. And I agree with that. It was kind of a letdown. I do like Liv Morgan. I think everybody likes Liv Morgan, but when Naomi returned at 2 and her and Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks left at the same time, I think when people saw Naomi at 2, they're like, okay, Sasha's gotta, this is her time. Cause I think she got injured. And so she's been away from wrestling right now. And when you have it be Liv Morgan, we'll get started about the men's who was number 30 and that disappointment later on. But Liv, I think, was safe. But like I said, I would have, I think 30 would have been perfect for Jade in there. Man, I would have loved that in there. And then Bayley, doing what she did. I thought she had a great, Royal Rumble was very predictable. She was going to win, though. I think she was probably the odd, like 99.9% of everybody thought she was going to win. But they made her look strong. They made her look good. They sprinkled in some of that damage control. Asuka and Kairi Sane. They had a funny spot in there too. They had some good spots. But I thought the women's Royal Rumble was fun. I really enjoyed it. Opposed from being disappointed on kind of who was number 30, but it was good.
Well, the disappointing 30 spot doesn't mean, again, in Liv Morgan's case, that you're disappointed to see them back. It was like the 2014 one, the most disappointing 30 spot of all time was Rey Mysterio, the most beloved baby face of all time that you can't hardly cheer against. But people wanted Daniel Bryan, and they were and so the boos came on Rey Mysterio. I don't think it quite got to boo level with Liv Morgan, but it was a little bit underwhelming. And so it's kind of interesting just to see how they booked the Royal Rumble, because I'll say this about the women's match and the men's matches: they didn't have surprise returns this year as far as kind of the old guys or old gals that aren't going to have a long run, but sometimes it like an MVP it turned or a Lita. Sometimes it can turn into a bit of a run, and so it's kind of they didn't do that, and sometimes that's flexing the depth of the roster. Like in the women's case, I think that it definitely is. I think when they did the first women's Royal Rumble, they might have had like 20 competitors. Like the roster's now there that they don't have to do it, but it's personally part of what I like about the Royal Rumble. So I kind of missed that in both cases this year. And I'd agree with you. I think Bayley was predictable, yet the right choice. Yeah. Because this is a long storytelling, which we love as fans. It looks like it's going to, in Raw, would further indicate set up for a matchup and some dissentment within Bayley's group.
Yep.
And so we'll see how that goes. But certainly they look very strong, and Bayley is very interesting because she got cheers because the respect for her, despite her being one of the biggest heels. So I think just the respect level that's there, she can take pin after pin after pin, and she has throughout this role to kind of set you up to thinking she's not necessarily on a hot streak, but it would make sense for her to eventually turn, is that she can get the win though too at any time, and you're not surprised. You're not like, hey, that doesn't make it makes sense because of how Bayley is just one of the OGs in the women's revolution.
Yeah, and one thing I have to point out, R-Truth, national treasure. His spot was just hilarious. I genuinely laughed. Felt bad for Valhalla in there. But that was he's great. His involvement in there. But I do agree. Bailey is. I've always liked Bailey. I wasn't sure. When we started talking about this, started this podcast earlier this year. We were like, man, Damage Control has lost like 6 matches in a row. Bailey's taking the pins. We're like, what's going on here? And now she's the winner of the Royal Rumble, and they don't just give anybody the Royal Rumble wins. It's you're gonna main event WrestleMania. That's like the biggest match of your career.
Yeah.
Unless you're somebody who gets it and then next year doesn't goes down the pecking order. But I think the storytelling it's been long, it's been painful for her, but it's paying off now. And I think we'll see who she chooses to fight. I think it's going to be Io Sky more than likely, because that's where the story's going, and the payoff will be there. So I'm excited for that.
Which is interesting too, because what I had concerns about her early on in her career was just this absolute baby face heel, right? There's a difference between face and baby face, where it's just like you couldn't be any better of a character as far as the good guy versus the bad guys, right? And so she was just really in hugging people and just role model and good guy. And she has been able to turn that. And part of it was actually with Sasha Banks during the COVID era with the empty arenas, is that they dominated is part of her heel work. And she's been able to carry that all the way to here, to which I think they will have to turn her face against Io Sky and Damage Control being the big bad group that's going to kick her out. But if she chooses Io Sky, does that make her the bad? I mean, I'm interested in. So they got. We know how this is going to end. How you set it up and how you make it look and how believable it is along the way will determine how good it is.
Yeah, and it is interesting because watching SmackDown and watching their story, it's because you have Io and the Kabuki Warriors. They're a clique, and then you got is Dakota Kai, right?
Yep.
Dakota Kai's kind of always sided with Bailey. And Bailey's kind of been the leader, but since Io won the championship, that kind of ascended her to the top. So if you watch it, it's been like the Kabuki Warriors and Io have kind of been their little clique within their group. And Bailey and Dakota have always kind of been, on the outsides per se. So, I think the storytelling there's been good on that. They're together, but you can tell there's just a little bit of friction, that it's not meshing like it should. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It's going to be fun. And, they have, what are we, like 2 months away from WrestleMania now? They got 2 months to tell that story, get it right and get us excited for this, because there could be a little bit of a struggle because Io, Kairi, and Asuka don't really speak English all that well.
Right.
So Bailey's going to have to really carry those promos if she's going against them.
Which is why the real winner of the Rumble was Io Sky.
Yeah.
Because and the WWE for their long-term storytelling, because they used Money in the Bank to put somebody in a position to elevate. And and she's fought everybody. She's with Damage Control's help, as course of the heel faction has defeated all these big names, but still Io Sky, as much as I love her as she's great in the ring and I love her as a wrestler, as you mentioned, there's just kind of a language barrier. And so herself drawing just a opponent that doesn't necessarily have a connection to her, I don't think that's WrestleMania worthy.
Yeah.
Bailey turning on Damage Control and Io Sky elevates Io Sky in a storyline to where it can be. And so I think that, I think it's been a very good job by WWE to help elevate Io Sky as their women's champion.
Yep.
We'll move on here to the championship match, the 4-way between Roman Reigns, that is, LA Knight, Randy Orton, and AJ Styles. Of course, if you have been following wrestling, Roman Reigns is going to win, and likely with the help of his own heel faction. And that happened once again in this game, or in this match. It was a good, hard-hitting match. Of course, Solo Sikoa of the Bloodline shows up, pulls the ref's foot to save Reigns from being pinned at one point in the match. I really liked the stacking opponent of the match, because at some point, I think it was Reigns who was looking to stack his opponents, or it was actually Solo who stacked a few of them for him, and then he got punched and knocked out into it. I believe from the top rope from AJ Styles, and so it was 3 guys stacked there for a second. They all kicked out. I thought that was a very entertaining part of the match. And ultimately, Reigns, though, pins AJ Styles to retain. Also, throughout this match, you could kind of tell, too, Reigns and Orton could have done this alone.
Yep.
And we thought with Orton's return that might be the case. They added LA Knight and Styles to the match, and they've kind of had a rivalry within themselves. So a lot of this was LA Knight and Styles going at it and Orton and Reigns going at it, which for these three guys, it's just kind of interesting because they easily would have elevated and made more interest because they're all been hunting, been trying to get to Roman Reigns. It would have made the men's Royal Rumble, I think, a little bit more interesting if instead of having Knight and Styles in this, maybe have them going after Reigns and then put them in the Royal Rumble as well, put a little more stakes in it. But the opposite of that is fans might turn on you if you don't let LA Knight win the Royal Rumble. Yeah. So they kind of let us knew who wasn't going to be the Royal Rumble winner by putting them in this match. But still, I thought a very entertaining match.
Yeah, no, it was fine. I thought, that them four put on a good performance. It's hard to watch a Roman Reigns match sometimes. I'm a Roman Reigns fan. I still like him. I still watch it. But man, Solo, the whole coming in with the hood, that stuff kind of gets a little, you're like, who's going to do it? When's it going to happen? But yeah, no, the four of them I thought had great spots. Orton, I thought looked great. I thought he looked strong.
Crowd favorite seems like that too.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very glad that Knight didn't take the pin because, we talked about it. You talked about it. Maybe he was given chances too early, kind of push down our throats, all that stuff.
Non-organically.
Non-organically on there. And he didn't take it. And Styles has won a championship. He's a WWE champion. You pick him to take the pin there. But for a split second, a part of me forgot that there was going to be interference. And I was really like, man, Randy Orton looked like he was going to be the guy, to maybe dethrone him. That's a guy I thought that realistically had a shot. But then at the same time, Reigns, came in, looked strong, as always, he's a champ, he's untouchable in there. I would give it like a 7 out of 10. I thought it was entertaining. It was good. I would really just love though for once if the WWE would just, like in this instance, if Reigns could have just pulled off a clean win. I know that's not his story and all that, but man, can you imagine if he could have pulled off a clean win on these three guys? Then you'd really be like
building him up.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're like, okay, he's a legitimate champ, that can do it on his own there. So
yeah, that's one route they could have gone. But I do think to WWE's credit, they at least got you and many fans, and that's the challenge of these matches that Reigns is going to win because they've been building his character up forever. That it has to go to WrestleMania. The challenge is at least for a half second, just get people to think maybe they'll do this, and they end up not doing it, and ultimately you're mad at the heel group. So I guess that was the goal.
It's what they want.
We'll move on to the U.S. Championship. Logan Paul and Kevin Owens. Good hard-hitting match back and forth. Logan Paul again. If you'd recognize the name outside of wrestling, don't be fooled. The guy can go. And Kevin Owens is a great, a counterpart to that because he's one of the best technical wrestlers that the WWE has, as far as at least the moveset that they ask him to do. Ultimately, Austin Theory gets involved, passes brass knuckles to Paul. Owens gets a hold of the brass knuckles at some point instead and uses them on Paul, knocks him out. And then, of course, because he is a face, the referee catches him red-handed. I think there was 2 count, and then, he saw the brass knuckles and therefore declares Logan Paul still the champion and the winner of the match via disqualification. Kevin Owens still gets the music walking out. So I'm probably going to see another, this was the type of finish you're going to see more of this feud moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. It'll probably be an elimination chamber match. But I thought this was a funny match to me. Because when that ref sees those brass knuckles, he's looking down at the shoulders, 1, 2, and then his eyes just magically look up, and it's like, wait a minute, what do you got on there? It's like, what do you got on there? And the whole part, once the gold knuckles, it was it could have been a swerve. When Kevin hit that, you're like, wait a minute, is he about to pin and win on there? But I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was a good match. It was a lot more entertaining than I thought it'd be, but it's because Logan, like you said, Logan Paul and Kevin Owens are great wrestlers. They're great in the ring. Logan Paul has to get credit for that. I mean, yeah, he's a YouTuber, all that stuff, but man, he is athletic. He can pull off some moves. And being in there with a veteran like Kevin Owens, I mean, that's just, it's great. The whole Austin Theory, and them kind of being in it, I'm like, all right, you're kind of filling in a spot for them. But yeah, no, it was a good match. So I had fun watching it.
Yeah, I thought it was solid enough. And I think it also goes to both Logan Paul Pat McAfee and WWE's credit that they can, kind of have this type of pull this off at the Royal Rumble. And it's not necessarily, hey, this is a storyline. It's just kind of, we're used to now Pat McAfee and Logan Paul being part of wrestling, yet they bring in so many outside eyes, to every event that it's obviously great for both sides. Let's take a quick break. Then we'll get into the men's Royal Rumble because we've exhausted our time here for our first segment because there's so much to talk about. The men's Royal Rumble we'll jump into next, then we'll get to Raw. That's all coming up next year on Nuclear Heat on 93.7 The Ticket. Welcome back to Nuclear Heat, our weekly week-in review for wrestling and WWE in specific. And this week it's a good week to do the show because the Royal Rumble is madly entertaining. My favorite premium live event that WWE puts on. Yes, that includes WrestleMania, just because of the match format for the Royal Rumble and the stakes that it has. It's almost like a Final Four, if you will, if you want to compare it to the sports terms, I suppose. As the winner of the match will move on and headline WrestleMania. We talked about how Bayley won the Women's Royal Rumble and will likely go on to take on Io Sky of Damage Control, of course, turn on Damage Control at WrestleMania or shortly before then and set that match up. Now let's get to the men's Royal Rumble. And this one started with Uso on Uso. And I know a lot of people like that. Jey Uso, very over with the crowd because of his kind of arm movements and gets people going. Jimmy, his character's got, something to it. I don't know if it was always the perfect fit. You and I have talked about on this podcast before. We don't love the breakup of the Usos from the Bloodline. It's clearly taken Jey to a whole nother level, especially as a face in this whole situation. And I'll tell you what, I mean, that's impressive on its own because I'm a big wrestling fan, and I know the Usos are one of the best WWE tag teams of all time. But before this, before this whole Bloodline thing, could I necessarily pick out Jimmy from Jey? Yeah. Not every time. So in that way, I think it's all working. But I will say this, as hot as that would have been a few months ago, it wasn't quite on the same level to have Uso versus Uso, but it's still, for a lot of the Bloodline and the Uso fans, is a good start, a good enough way to start the Rumble.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there was a lot of excitement when, Jey, and then you hear Jimmy's music go off there. And I think part of it too is that, you only get a minute between wrestlers, a minute and a half. So they only got, 45 seconds of them to be able to do something. So it's a sneak peek of probably what we'll see at WrestleMania from brother there. But I agree, this is something, I mean, Jimmy, what has Jimmy really been doing? He's just been making Roman Reigns mad, recently, been taking pins. And Jey, on the other hand, is still hot, but he's not, I don't think he's as hot as he was because he's not, he's kind of just in the middle of things.
He's never actively in a feud. He's just kind of fighting guys from Raw to Raw.
And it's weird because it's like, this guy was his enemy. Now this week, this guy's his friend. It's kind of like they got lost in what they do. But I thought, it was cool to see brother from brother. I don't think, we've really ever seen that, where they are going after each other in the Rumble. You have some brothers in there together fight, with each other. But I thought that was a cool way to start it and kind of a fun little nod to Jimmy and Naomi being married. They both entered at number 2. So I thought that was pretty interesting there as well.
Well, and interesting too, is you have brother versus brother, but you don't get the other brother in. I thought, Solo Sikoa entering the match would have been wildly entertaining. They could have teased kind of, is he going to be in? Is he not? Is Roman bothered by it? That sort of thing. They avoided that completely, but I think that it would have been very entertaining to kind of bring that back, to have all 3 of them in the ring. You don't have to do 1, 2, 3, but maybe the first 5, and then they're all in there. You get a stare down. You get, for a while, I thought that maybe Solo could actually pull this thing off. In fact, if I was fantasy booking, I'd have him, go on to the final 5 or something like that. So you're legitimately just like, oh my gosh, but they decided to completely keep him out of it, which fair enough. And like we said, we have our different grades on the whole thing, but we thought the women's match was better than the men's. A few opportunities just missing like that, though.
No, and Solo hasn't been in a Royal Rumble yet, has he? Because he elevated, and like I said, they use him in a, prime time main of, pay-per-view or premium live event. He's an interference for Roman Reigns. This guy is a great wrestler. I mean, Solo, he's over. He's over, and they're using him kind of just as a henchman. So I agree with you. I mean, and we'll talk about it. There were a lot of spots that were wasted in this Rumble, and I thought some pretty bad decisions on there. But if you could have had Solo Sikoa in there, I mean, that, elevates it all there instantly. Because, they're, like you said, if he wins it or gets close to winning it, Roman's got to be nervous there because there's always that, oh crap, is he gonna turn on me next? So some wasted opportunities. I agree.
And it's a storyline that would have told itself. You kind of read between the lines, even if you didn't set it up. If it happens, like the enormity of the moment would really take over, and the crowd would react. Which, by the way, I've also heard, just listening to some other wrestling podcasts, complaints about the fans maybe not quite getting. There can be some wear on you once you kind of get to that part of the night. What do you think about the fan reaction? And again, I think it's been part. People blame it on the fans. Other people are kind of saying a lot of this, the intro music and just the presentation, you couldn't kind of tell what was going on. Did you notice any of that?
I did. It sounded a little like when Liv came at 30. I understand there's disappointment, but it wasn't as big of a pop. There you could just tell. You could tell they maybe had to pipe in some noise. Some fans there. I saw a lot. They try not to pan on them, but you can see a lot of disappointment faces. And like, especially for the women's, it was great. And I love that they're using the active roster, but like, as you mentioned, the surprises is what really gets people going. I don't watch NXT, so I don't know half of these NXT people's music. So, when Corey Graves, Michael Cole are going crazy, you're like, who is that? You got to wait to walk out. And then there were even times where I was like, okay, I don't know who this person is. And that, that makes it hard for the fans too. But at this point, I mean, the fans have been there for probably 5 or 6 hours now too. So, that does make it hard to stay excited that long when you're there.
Yeah, it does. And so we'll see. Eventually I'll get to a Royal Rumble and I'll try to keep the energy going for the crowd. Big return in this was Andrade making his return from AEW. And it's interesting because a newer company. We've talked, and it is finally to the point. It's going to kind of go through these cycles of kind of mimicking WCW and WWF back in the day. Obviously, WWE is just on a whole nother level that will hardly ever be touchable, you would think, from AEW. So they are going to be the WCW of it. But it's interesting because when they started it, it was like, okay, are they going to bring somebody back? And then eventually they bring Cody back. And then this show was kind of about AEW, if you kind of think about it, because they do, spoiler, we'll get to it, but they do finish with CM Punk and Cody Rhodes, who you could argue are WWE names because that's what drew them to AEW and made them big names there. But that was kind of had an AEW feel to it. Jade Cargill obviously had the AEW feel to it. And then their kind of big return to me that was surprising, though you might be able to see it if you kind of read the dirt sheets. It was Andrade returning from AEW. So Andrade, I think a lot of people feel like his first run didn't quite get, he got a kind of U.S. champion, but didn't quite reach the peak. He's a really good technical wrestler. He put on some really great matches with Rey Mysterio back in the day. And we'll kind of see what's next for him. But I love the return of Andrade. I love to see him back at the WWE.
Yeah, and I was very surprised. That's a theme song I didn't know of, when he's there, and he has a mask now. I haven't followed him on AEW, so I don't really know, what he's changed, but I thought he looked great. And, it wasn't here's Andrade, eliminated, in a minute or so. He had a good little run in there. Not to mention now he's got the Flair rub, because he's married to Charlotte, and all that stuff. So, it
goes a long way in that company.
Yeah, a huge way in that company there. But no, I agree. I actually saw a bunch of things on Twitter and stuff too, where people were like, this was the WWE showing off what AEW couldn't do. Because AEW tried to make the name off of, Cody started the company, Cody had a hand in it. And now he's, being shoved up. I'll say it, you won't say, I don't know. Right, he's being shoved down our throats, on there and CM Punk, with that as well. But no, it was a good surprise by Andrade. I thought, some of the wrestlers that came back, I wasn't too excited about. But then there were some that put on some pretty good, debuts, I would say, and really, impressed me.
Yeah, I think the Jade Cargill of the men's match, if you will, was Braun Breaker. Yes. And I know we've seen him slightly on the main roster, a lot in the NXT where he was the champion, and he's Big Papa Pump's son. So you're naturally interested in that, not only because of the lineage, but also because Rick Steiner actually didn't get along with WWE for the longest time. So is there going to be any effect, I suppose, of that to the future of Braun Breaker? Probably not. I think they feel pretty good about him. But I'll say this about Braun, and it might be a slight. He was almost too good because you saw how fast. And wrestling's a funny business where guys sometimes don't peak, and it's just kind of this ultimate building. So, sometimes the peak of your career is when you're 40 or, 38 for a lot of these guys. And Braun being so young, like just compared to some of the guys out there, he looks so fast and so athletic and so like the part that it kind of took away from some of the other guys and what they typically do. But like, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, no, it is. And, if you read into it, the interesting thing is, I don't think he was supposed to have the kind of impact he had, because I had read everywhere that he essentially took Brock Lesnar's spot. Like every elimination, everything Brock Lesnar did in the match, Braun did. But man, Braun just looked great. Like, how is he not on the main roster? How is he still in NXT? I get it, he's young, and stuff like that. And I think he's dabbled in the main event, right? Like they bring him up and he does matches, goes back and forth. But man, he looks like a star. He looks like he's ready to go. And he's that. I know the Vince McMahon era is gone. Good, we don't need him back in there. But Braun is that typical, like, he's huge. He's huge in there. And like you said, man, he outshined it. If there was a guy in the men's, I would say it was Braun that had probably the greatest, night, greatest showcase out there.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that was kind of noted here. Kofi Kingston, no special moment. He's usually got a special moment lined up for you at the Royal Rumble, so naturally that's a little bit disappointing. I think he should be thinking that year round, just what he can do. But he's done so many different things, but and it's always kind of the 2-foot rule, and so he can kind of skate by that. But just nothing really, no highlights out of him.
Well, I think if you remember the last 2 years, he's tried and he's botched.
Yeah.
So and I think Kofi's almost 40 now, or he's 40. He's close. I mean, I was like 12 years old when he was, in the prime of his career, and I'm in my 30s now. So, but it's always fun, and I've seen a bunch of things, where it's like he did the chair, the handstand.
Oh yeah.
He jumped from the barricade to that. But and then
Great moments.
it showed the last 2 years, he tried to jump to the barricade and he tries to hold his feet up and they hit the ground, and then the whole chair thing falling over on him. So I was disappointed like you was as well, but we got to remember that man's pushing 40. So, if he could do that at that age, that'd be even more impressive.
One part I was a little bit disappointed in was the Karrion Kross and Lashley shenanigans. I mean, these are two bruisers that should be believable as far as like pushing this match and being in it. Neither of them lasted too long. Yeah. I believe Bobby eliminated Karrion, and then Karrion eliminated Bobby from the outside ropes after the Authors of Pain come down. And so it's all just kind of helping, and they do this with every Rumble, and I have a complaint about it every Rumble. There are some that are just kind of helping the feud that is going to be over in 2 weeks, and you just kind of feel, I don't know. And especially the outside interference stuff, because that's where you really have to suspend your disbelief, because if there's outside interference available, why aren't the guys that aren't getting in coming in just wrecking it's so
exactly.
It's not a spot that I necessarily care for.
My biggest pet peeve is that if you can eliminate somebody if you've been eliminated from the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, Karrion got eliminated by Bobby. Bobby was on the edge. Yeah. Karrion grabs his leg, pulls him out. He's eliminated. I don't think that should be a thing gone, because it comes every year. It happens. Somebody gets, eliminated that way, and it always makes me mad. I'm like, how? That guy's not in, the Royal Rumble. So like it just... and
I felt bad for Ludwig Kaiser, because he actually entered at the same time, and the Authors of Pain were like beating the guys up, going on because the other guys that came out with Bobby, I can't think of their name now. Hold up the red cup and all that.
Yeah, Montez Ford and Dawkins.
And Dawkins, yes. They were getting beat up. They weren't even in the Rumble match, so they didn't have much of a showcase there. But all the way back up to Ludwig Kaiser, coming in the ring, and he's doing his normal eyebrow thing and just kind of looking around. And it really kind of took a spot for his first Royal Rumble, but that was okay. Altogether, they put some good work in here. Omos returning. I think that's good to get your larger than life guy in the ring. It's typically been a Big Show or a Kane. Good to see Omos return. They put Gunther in this match, which I thought he was believable, maybe to challenge Seth Rollins. In the way that they had been pushing him, so I thought it was good to include him. Drew McIntyre and of course CM Punk being huge, came in late before the 30th entry, Sami Zayn, which unfortunately anybody that hoped for The Rock got Sami Zayn's music instead. So once again, Sami Zayn very beloved, so I think that's a good spot for him if you're not going to get The Rock. Still, maybe even though it's been obvious what's happening, bring in CM Punk there, or make it because then we would know at 29 that The Rock's not there and that CM Punk's going to come in and possibly win from the 30 spot.
Yeah. And I agree with that. You feel bad for Sami because Sami just last year was the hottest name in WWE. Even earlier this year, hottest name. Now he's the guy that everybody's disappointed. And like you said, Rey Mysterio's been booed, all that stuff, but it wasn't believable that he's going to win. No. You use that 30 spot, as you said, for somebody that has a legitimate chance in there. And Sami didn't even last that long either. I think he was eliminated. Same with Omos. I know it was good, but Omos lasted 3-4 minutes maybe.
Yeah.
And then he was eliminated. In there, so some head scratching things, but all in all, it was fun. If you actually watched the action inside, it was good in there. But then when it came down to kind of the final 5 or so, it was a good, believable final 5. As you said, Gunther was in there, CM Punk, Cody was in there. Drew McIntyre, to me, great. I know he's still a big name, but I didn't think that was believable because I feel like he's somebody that they already kind of used everything they could for the main event push. So him being in there, you're kind of like, all right, big name, big guy in there. I thought it was interesting, and I'll let you kind of talk about it first, but CM Punk Cody being the final 2. I thought that was interesting to me. I know big names, all that stuff, but they dragged that on for a very long time.
Well, I think that was the wise decision, though. I do think that once it got that's what I kind of wanted out of the Rumble. Yeah, so I thought that's what they did do well. Obviously, why I have a lower grade for the Men's Royal Rumble is because The Rock didn't show up, and he's talked about WrestleMania on WWE TV and getting a shot at Roman. So, I kind of was expecting it. We'll still see if it happens. But I think if you're not going to do that, then I think it should come down to CM Punk and Cody because that's the story that's most believable, and you don't know which one's going to win. And so I thought that they made a pretty good move on it there. Now CM Punk, you could catch with the camera started talking about Dusty Rhodes, and that's usually a tell. Okay, he set a heel line, so here comes Cody's moment, and it did end up that way. Cody gets the win, first back-to-back winner since Stone Cold Steve Austin. And so you've got the fireworks, the tattoo, the gold hair, and Dusty's son. I don't know. Again, I don't know if I don't quite get it. The AEW story, it's all good to me. But maybe it is to your point to me with Cody. And I loved Cody Rhodes when he was Stardust, which he hated. Mm-hmm. But I've loved Cody Rhodes for a long time. This iteration of Cody Rhodes is absolutely over. Everybody loves him. And I think a lot of people are excited for it. For me, it was a little... We've been here before. We already did this. So, to finish the story narrative, I understand they've been working on that for a long time. So I get it, and I think it's good for wrestling altogether. But it wouldn't have been my pick. The thing is, my pick between those two would have been CM Punk, and he would have been out because of an injury he sustained in it anyway, which we can get to when we review Raw here in a second. So sometimes it works out for the best either way. CM Punk ends up pointing to Roman Reigns in the bleachers, and that's how we leave Royal Rumble. Yeah,
and my pick, by the way, was Gunther because I wanted the Monday Night Raw. Gunther confronted Seth and said, I'm going to win. I'm going to pick you. And the reason I'm so against Cody is because he's going to pick Roman to try to finish the story. So that now The Rock versus Roman at WrestleMania that has been hyped for, I'd say, a month now by The Rock.
2 years, but for years.
But getting more steam, especially now that The Rock is
believable.
The Rock is now on the board of directors of TKO, which owns WWE. He went on ESPN and said, "Hey, I never say never to this WrestleMania." So with Cody winning, now it's like that's not happening because Roman doesn't have the 2 titles anymore. He's got the one unified, I guess is what you'd call it. So he's only going to wrestle one night. So
maybe I think there is still a chance maybe you get Roman in the first match because the thing is too this whole Roman. What's fascinating behind that story too is like if The Rock returns, it'll be great for selling tickets, but he's not going to stick around. So you can't really give him the championship. He kind of has to lose to Roman. Whereas if they are going to finally make the change, you can have a Cody Rhodes win, and it will be the first questionable match that Roman Reigns has fought for quite some time, probably since the last WrestleMania. Yeah. So at least that kind of leaves you wondering what's going to happen. But of course, you would know the same thing. But they could do the old Daniel Bryan earn it type of thing, maybe for The Rock. Maybe you get a triple threat, something along those lines.
That'd be fun.
I hope so, because to me, it's just I'll be as excited as anybody. Not, that's a lie. But I mean, I'll still be very interested in the match. But it will be not The Rock versus Roman type of deal.
And like you said, we saw this last year. This was the exact match, and it was a great match. But all right, I'm gonna put it this way: Cody is over for some people, right? Very over.
Yeah.
Very, very over. But tell me, would you be excited that he's the guy that dethrones Roman Reigns and he's the next guy that has to hold the mantle of the it? I mean, yeah, everybody's doing a good job of promoting him. He's, like I said, he's over with probably 60-70% of the crowd, but he's being forced down our throats. He's not earning it, as you said. He's kind of just being given all of these opportunities. I mean, the man, if you're going to give him this Royal Rumble win, at least make him come in at like number 3 or number 4. Make him, give him one of those stories, opposed to last year it was 30. This year he was
15. I believe.
Yeah, 15. Yeah. I mean, which is still a decent number, but it's not that Iron Man, that is deserving of it. But who am I to say who's deserving of what in there? But, because they're selling, like you said, that's going to be a great match. They're two great workers. They do have a storyline built. And you're right. If The Rock versus Roman, The Rock can't win that. I mean, but just imagine as a Rock fan, if they were, I'm going to say dumb enough to give The Rock a win like that or something,
Maybe you have The Rock win and then have Priest cash in or something crazy.
That's what I'm saying. You could do something like that, but could you imagine if The Rock, dethroned it? It's just The Rock. It's The Rock.
Yeah.
You're going to break records for WrestleMania, which is ultimately what you want to do, because we'll be honest, anything after WrestleMania is kind of the downtime of the WWE. It's when mega stars take time off.
In fact, they call it the premium live event, whatever it is after WrestleMania, just to try to hug on to any sort of money, shake that money tree one more time.
Yeah, it's what is that name? It's like it's not Backlash, is it? It
might be something like that, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's something, and it's literally all of the WrestleMania matches again.
Yeah.
As you said, and nothing changes. It's the same exact stuff. So why not, throw something out there? Hey, let's give The Rock, a WWE title for 3 months,
I'd love
have it happen. I mean, hey, he's not doing anything else right now.
And to Roman Reigns, I know they've built Roman Reigns as much as you can, give him as many WrestleMania events as he can, but there's nothing quite mainstream to bring WWE back as The Rock as champion for a few weeks or a few months would be. So maybe it is something they do consider. Traditionally, you think if you build somebody up like a Gunther for as long as they have, like a Roman Reigns for as long as they have, you want them to put somebody over, and the Rock and Roman Reigns can't put The Rock over. The Rock's already mega over. So that would be the one thing that you would think might not traditionally happen, but it would be an all-time wrestling moment. And maybe with the change of events, maybe some different thoughts up there. So we'll see.
And then if you have problems, if you do The Rock and he wins, so this is just fantasy now. Hey, Triple H comes out of retirement, they have a match, because you're going to tell me this. If The Rock won a championship and he was at Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, they're going to sell out. They're going to break records. He could do that for half a year. He could just carry it.
It's more about his time schedule.
Yes, exactly.
WWE would have done this at any point in time.
But that's what I'm saying is it works. It could work. And you could just bring everything up and then just imagine you bring somebody up organically or, a Braun Breaker. He beats The Rock.
Yeah.
Boom. You've got storyline after storyline. You got your next big star. Roman comes back out. I mean, beautiful things can happen.
Yeah.
It can go there.
That's right. Cody won the rest of the Royal Rumble, and we're still fantasy booking The Rock to beat Roman Reigns. That's Nuclear Heat here on 93.7 The Ticket. We're a bit disappointed. We have our own WrestleMania events that we've kind of been thinking about for months. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and review Raw quickly so we can wrap up our week of wrapping up our week of wrestling. We'll do that next year on 93.7 The Ticket. And we are back here on Nuclear Heat, our weekly review of the week in wrestling of the WWE. And this week has been the Royal Rumble and now WWE Raw, which was last night. Again, Raw in 2025, we'll be moving to streaming only. So let's enjoy our last few years of the USA Network here, year plus, I suppose. We opened up the Raw with CM Punk with a tearful promo, shouting out some of his friends and firefighters who are the real heroes. This all being despite the fact that he is injured, cannot fight at WrestleMania, and is very disappointed. So it was a very good babyface promo. Surprisingly, Drew McIntyre's music hit, and he said some very mean things to CM Punk, including, "I want you to know I prayed for this and it happened." McIntyre talking about Punk's injury, and also saying that he was going to go and headline WrestleMania and take Punk's story, his dream, so be it. So very good heel work from Drew McIntyre, who's often kind of been in the middle there. He also ended up beating up to CM Punk, hit him with a Glasgow kiss, stomped on his injured tricep. Sami Zayn eventually makes the save to set up the main event of the night. But very good work here. And the interesting thing is that Drew McIntyre, as far as we know, is not signed a contract much longer in WWE, yet they're setting him up for a long-term storytelling with CM Punk. So let's let you know they feel very confident about retaining Drew.
Yeah, no, and I thought this was perfect. I also got to say, I don't know, is he really injured or is this a work? Because some of the stuff that was said makes you think it's a work, but Punk's promo felt very heartfelt, that he's very upset, and it could just be he's great at that. But man, this made Drew McIntyre look really, really good on there. So I liked it. I think he's a lot better on the mic too. So, it's exciting for some things. And if it is a storyline, you could possibly have a McIntyre Punk thing happen here soon. But the way they're making it seem, I think Punk is going to be out for a while. So.
Well, and it's crazy too, because all of this, I mean, this past year in wrestling has been fantastic and just crazy returns. And part of that has been The Rock. Part of that has been CM Punk. And now with CM Punk injured, Seth Rollins injured, and though he's going to give it a go at WrestleMania, you've had a very realistic chance in talks of having The Rock and CM Punk at WrestleMania, and you could ultimately have neither of them.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's even more important to get The Rock in there somehow if you can work with his schedule, because I said this at the beginning of the show, you can't rewrite this stuff. CM Punk can come back, and if you remember, Cody had this long injury where he had to sit out too, and so it can kind of delay a story, but it takes a little bit of the steam off of the CM Punk return, unfortunately, which injuries can do. They moved on, and at Raw, Undisputed WWE Tag Team Championship, DIY, who was very over against the Judgment Day. DIY, who I should say was very over with that crowd.
Yeah.
I don't feel like every crowd it feels great about them. I personally am interested to see where they go, but am not necessarily ready for them to beat the Judgment Day. Despite a lot of near falls, they didn't. Very cool move, by the way, for Judgment Day to finish this one. Razor's Edge, leading to a coup de grace, was the finisher for this match. And then they had a nice beat down of R-Truth afterwards. They invited R-Truth out to the match. Basically, we're telling him to be part of Judgment Day and then tell him he's not. And then they beat him up. Miz tries to make the save, but he is outnumbered. The numbers catch up to him. So I thought very entertaining segment. They also had before this kind of the Judgment Day locker room, which I always love.
Yeah.
Trying to hype him up. So what you kind of think about a lot of different moving parts in here between the Miz and R-Truth and DIY and Judgment Day, but I thought this worked really well.
Yeah, I think they're setting it up for WrestleMania. I think it'll be DIY with what is it? The Awesome Truth is the name against the Judgment Day. I love the R-Truth story with the Judgment Day. I think R-Truth is great. He's comedy. He's hilarious. The Miz coming in to save him, even though R-Truth has kind of gone back and forth on which team he's with. I thought it was great, and I thought the match was good. DIY, I don't love them, but they are good wrestlers. So, they're going to put on a good show. And of course the Judgment Day is over. They're one of the biggest there. So I thought, it was interesting. It's a good, I won't say filler, because, it had some great moments in there, but it was a good match.
Yeah.
Good segment.
And this was part of the first hour without interruptions from commercials. So they really did have to put some workhorses in there, and they pulled this off very well. The opposite of a workhorse match was Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler versus Piper Niven and Chelsea Green. This one over very quick with Stark and Baszler with the win. The one good thing for Piper Niven and Chelsea Green in this match is that Samantha Irvin is saying Chelsea Green once again, which was taken out for I think a whole week before they decided that was silly. We should keep that up. So Chelsea Green and Piper Niven, former tag team champions. That was kind of the story they were telling as well, trying to heat up Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler, which is a heel faction that I'm very interested in, and I think if booked properly can work really well, but still kind of a mixed reaction from the crowd.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's because that women's tag team division is just hasn't. I don't even know who the champs are right now. Oh, no, it's Damage Control, right? Yeah. The Kabuki Warriors. There's just not much.
It's been passed around.
Yeah, it's been passed around, or they're not even included at all. You forget who it is sometimes. But I think Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler, they look like the real deal. Zoe Stark looks like kind of a young, more polished Shayna Baszler. And I think there's some excitement for that.
Yeah, I like that. I like that team, and eventually I like some dissension between the two, which will set up a good feud. Cody Rhodes then hits his promo, which was he even made Samantha Irvin reintroduce him. He was really taking it all in. Was about to announce that he was going to take on Roman Reigns at WrestleMania when Seth Rollins' music hits. He goes to the ring and tries to convince Cody Rhodes to challenge him for his title because they had been working on Raw together. They've been traveling the shows together, and he believes that he has defended that championship enough to make it elevate over Roman Reigns. Talking down Roman Reigns here, just trying, which is obviously an easy tactic to do, and trying to talk up his championship as the workhorse championship. And then, of course, it's what Dusty would have, bringing up Dusty and saying it's the belt that he would have wanted or whatever, makes Cody Rhodes think about this. Any chance that you think Cody Rhodes and Rollins get together so you can have Rock and Roman?
No, I would have loved it. I think it, for that reason alone, I want it to happen. But no, as much as Seth Rollins put everything behind that promo, the World Heavyweight Championship is just below the WWE Championship. Yeah. I mean, there's
one promo won't change that.
Exactly, and we know why Cody was given the Rumble win again is to finish the story. I mean, it's been 2 years or longer than that, of a build up 10, 20 years, whatever it is with Dusty, 30, 40, something like that. I don't know how long, and Dusty won the World Heavyweight Championship, right? He never won.
I believe he never did, actually. I
thought they were top. We can discuss this later, but it's something about the story, it just, this wouldn't seem right. If you're going to give Cody the Rumble win, he's got to go after Roman. Unfortunately for us Rock fans, it's got to be Roman versus Cody at that point.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny even because when Seth first brought it up, the WWE universe behind him was going, no. So you could tell what they want as well, and that's not just that arena; that'll be just about every arena. So we'll see. Kind of add some intrigue to it, buys you some time.
Yep.
Cody Rhodes promo finished there, so we go move on to Jey Uso taking on Bronson Reed, who is now a part of, now I'm forgetting. I was going to say the video game. You remember where you could be a giant lizard or a donkey and go
the
and beat up
buildings?
Punch yeah. Rampage.
Yeah.
The Rock, I think.
The Rock's movie, Rampage,
which
wasn't that good, but we'll forgive him for that one.
He's got a few stinkers, but Big Bronson Reed's new promotion screen behind him was him beating up buildings. I thought that was kind of fun. But anyways, after a good battle, they give Jey Uso the win. More of the same for Jay, more of the same for Big Bronson Reed. This didn't do a whole lot for me. I like the guys involved, but it's not a long, drawn-out feud. Bronson Reed provides a challenge and impresses every week, but comes up short, and then talks a big bad game the next week. And Jey Uso gets a win, very over with the crowd, and not doing the same thing the next week. It's just kind of a same storyline.
Yep, same old. I mean, great match, good match, but they're not going to do anything. It was a 1 week filler, something to give them something to do. Because ultimately, I have no idea what either one of these are going to do, moving forward. Like you said, Jay's just kind of around, still hot. Yeah. Big Bronson Reed, they keep trying to push him, like you said, keep trying to put him in feuds, but he keeps losing them. So it's like, what do you do with a guy who's 6 foot, 350 pounds, and can freaking do a moonsault, off the top ring? He's got the build, he's got everything there. They're just not utilizing him correctly.
Well, and it's heels can kind of get stuck in this too, because ultimately the crowd does like the good guys and will cheer for the good guys. And so if you're not at the highest level of a heel, if you're kind of a mid-card heel, you're going to take a lot of L's because, in live event, like he does have the, especially his moonsault off the top rope for a man his size, like that's very over with the crowd. And so he's so impressive and does good heel work, but he's not a top heel. So until he can kind of turn that page, I don't see him getting too many wins. But he fills a role that many heels have filled before.
Yep.
And so we'll see if he can get that over that in his career at some point. From there, we have a backstage segment. Adam Pearce and Andrade signing a contract with the Raw brand. So we know Andrade will be there. It's kind of interesting, though, because Nick Aldis, the SmackDown GM, was in the room talking about business with Adam Pearce, and he got a call from Braun Breaker. So you can kind of see there. It looks like SmackDown's getting Braun Breaker, Raw getting Andrade. SmackDown, Braun Breaker, and Roman Reigns feud. I mean, maybe down the line, but I like that idea. And Andrade, I think, as much as we love his return, I don't think he's quite at that level. Yeah. So I think he'll be good. He's a face. Maybe you could get him involved with Gunther or something like that. So I think it's a good split.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I agree. And I like Braun going to SmackDown because it's a smaller roster, so there's more time for him. Whereas Andrade, like you said, he'll be put in something, but you can get lost on that Raw roster. Yeah. 3 hours. Bigger roster, you could get into those filler matches. I think with Braun, SmackDown, you can put him against an AJ Styles, somebody who has a name, start to bring him up, and it can go a lot quicker that way.
Which is good too for the SmackDown roster, because I don't mean this to be rude. They kind of have made that the bridge between the NXT and well, it's not a bridge because it is the main roster, but that's kind of where they kind of promote those guys usually, and so it's more the same for Braun Breaker. But to me, sometimes I'm just not, like you said, familiar with those people that they're bringing up. And so, I kind of get lost and don't necessarily want to watch some of those feuds that they put them in. Braun Breaker is different. It's kind of come from the same storyline, so I can trust that they'll do the same thing, but I'll be interested. So that'll be good moving forward there. You had the Intercontinental Championship after that, Kofi Kingston and Gunther. Gunther always puts on a heck of a match. Kofi Kingston, the same, and we got the same thing here. Gunther ultimately does get the win, and then Imperium comes up and beats out New Day post the match as Kofi had his buddy come out as well. Thoughts on this one? It was, again, similar to Roman Reigns. It's just was there at any moment in this time that you thought Kofi would be the one to dethrone Gunther?
No, not at this point. I mean, Gunther's on how big of a win streak right now, besides like the Royal Rumbles and things like that. If Gunther, if they had more prestige, big prestige, that's not the word, a bigger, how do you say it? Like if the Intercontinental Champion wasn't a mid card, he'd be Roman Reigns at this moment, like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. He's kind of a combination, he's there all the time and he's a big name.
Yeah.
I'm kind of worried though, because they've been teasing this New Day, Imperium thing for a while. I don't want it to, I would love it if like Big E came back or something, and made it 3-on-3. But I would hate that for Gunther to be stuck in a 3-on-3 match opposed to something on his own. Because right now it seems like he's directionless that way, because it looks like Seth Rollins is trying to feud with somebody else, whereas last week you thought Gunther was going against Seth Rollins. So that's kind of my fear on that one. But I thought it was a good match.
Yeah, we'll see, because if they want to elevate Gunther from where he is, he can't take the Intercontinental Championship anywhere further, it doesn't feel like. So eventually they have to have him drop it and then get into the main title picture. But how does he drop it? Again, you can put somebody from the mid card really over, and we'll see who they choose that to be. But again, wasn't likely to be the veteran Kofi Kingston, who already is over in Hall of Famer. Yep. So we move on to the next matchup: Tegan Nox and Natalya against the Kabuki Warriors. Again, and I feel like the biggest anti-Natalya fan when I talk about her, because I've never found too much of what they put her in to be very good. Now she's a trooper, she's a warrior, she's done a lot of feuds or a lot of characters in the past, and including being the farting girl in the locker room. So I mean, you appreciate the work that she's done, and she's been there for so long. But with the story they were kind of telling in this match was, one, interestingly enough, the Kabuki Warriors were fighting as the champions, not for the championship. I don't know if I always like that, but nevertheless, they have a miscommunication between Tegan Nox and Natalya, which is likely going to lead to further dissension between the team. The problem is I could care less whether that team splits up. I probably wouldn't. I'd never notice if they never showed up again. I don't mean to be rude. I mean, I didn't notice if Natalya never showed up again, but Natalya and Tegan Nox, they just haven't kept them. They don't have too much of a storyline. When they do, it's like forced upon you. You don't necessarily want to watch it. So I don't know what the future is between that, and it's kind of a tough, because Tegan Nox, you would think this would be a good rub to work along Natalya. as your first kind of stint in the main picture, but and maybe it's just me, but I could care less.
No,
I'm sorry.
I'll be honest with you. When they have their segments, that's the bathroom break. That's the time there, and you do feel bad because Tegan Knox looks like she can be something, but I think Natalia's just past her days. She's just there, like you said. She's a name. The Hart Dynasty. And they're nothing. I mean, this was a filler time. And this is what I mean when I was talking about earlier. The Kabuki Warriors are the tag team champions, and this is your segment on Raw they have against Natalya and Tegan Knox. And then it's not even a story about them; it's a story about Natalya and Tegan Knox. I don't even know who Tegan Knox is, honestly. I know she's been on the roster for about a year. Natalya hasn't done any. The last thing she was remembered of was she was pinned by Rhea Ripley in 11 seconds in Saudi Arabia, was it, or something like that? Yeah, she was beat down. Everybody said, why'd she get a chance? I mean, this mind-boggling for me, and it was nothing.
Yeah, and it seems to me, because they did the Zoe Stark, Shayna Baszler, and Piper Niven and Chelsea Green, I would just switch that. Have Tegan Knox and Natalya get run over by the Kabuki Warriors. That way you're building up the Kabuki Warriors. And more Piper Niven and Chelsea Green's not a bad thing for me. I think, they were previous champions. Chelsea Green's incredibly over with their character work. So I think they could have just went longer. I know they're telling the Stark Baszler dominant story, but any win over Niven and Green would have looked good. You don't need to be as dominant. So I would have just kind of switched the times there between those two women matches. Or here's an idea. It doesn't have to be the women have a set amount of time. You could take from some of the other segments as well. So I just feel like, I agree with you. That was not the most exciting match with your current champions in it. So I think that's a bit of a problem. The Bayley promo preceded that, or followed that, excuse me. It was good. She came out with her whole crowd, her heel group, and basically took credit for everything that Damage Control has done, which I think is interesting. How would the other girls kind of feel about that? And it still makes you kind of wonder, is she the face if she splits off from him? Is she the heel? We'll kind of see. It might be a little bit of in between. In any case, I also did not like how they did this, because Rhea Ripley came out. Of course, the idea here, if you don't have a thought ahead to what they're doing, is that Bayley would use her opportunity to cash in, or excuse me, her opportunity. It's not a Money in the Bank, but use this opportunity to go after Rhea Ripley. So they had Rhea Ripley come out and start talking trash. Nia Jax interrupted that, came and beat up Rhea Ripley completely. I don't think Ripley got any offense in. I don't think this was a good look for one of your hottest, youngest, up-and-coming stars who is the current champion that you parade around. I just did not like this. I know they're telling the story of Nia Jax being the one that squashes everybody, but she lost a little momentum at Royal Rumble because she had just been thrown out by Jade Cargill. And I just don't like Ripley getting completely destroyed without any offense. In any case, Ripley wouldn't get up. Nia Jax cornered Bayley and basically told her not to pick Nia Jax, which kind of, you could see Io Sky kind of thinking, well, what does that mean? So you kind of start the idea there, and Bayley said she'll pick her next opponent Friday SmackDown. So a good promo to set you up in interest of what's going to happen on SmackDown.
Yeah, my feelings about Nia Jax. She, why'd they bring her back? There's no point on there. I was so disappointed.
Big Nia Jax fan over here, by the way.
I was so disappointed in this segment because it's like you squash your untouchable WWE Raw Women's Champion. She got squashed. And if you're telling me it's going to be Nia Jax versus Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, there's no excitement. Rhea Ripley just lost everything that you did. So what does this do? I mean, other than telling us you have nothing for Rhea Ripley right now, because we know where Bayley, Io Sky, really, when was the last time Rhea Ripley wrestled the match too? I mean, it was that Fatal 4-Way, I think. She was in a couple months ago that Nia Jax was unfortunately a part of too.
Yeah.
This just surprised me, disappointed me. I really hope they don't go with a Nia Jax versus Rhea. If they do it at Elimination Chamber, that's fine. But then that you turn around and you have a month to set up a new feud with Rhea that's going to feel real for WrestleMania, the biggest time of the year. So I don't get it.
And it is interesting to see what they do. I mean, they could get to a point where you don't have anybody in particular, so you set up another Fatal 4-Way or 3-Way or something, and throw Bianca and or somebody else out there. Jade Cargill would obviously be very interesting. I don't know if they would run to that right away. But I don't know. I don't think there is an obvious matchup for Rhea Ripley, which is unfortunately, again, because I think she's among the most over in the company. So we'll see what they do there. Leaves some intrigue for the months to set it up. Main event in this segment here in this Raw, Sami Zayn against Drew McIntyre. Hard-hitting affair, lots of near falls. Sami Zayn, if you remember, came back at the Royal Rumble because Drew McIntyre took him out a few weeks ago. But the story kept telling, and they said it on commentary too, that Sami Zayn has never beaten Drew McIntyre in a singles event. I don't know if they're going to try to draw this out, because you wonder what's the plan for both those guys at WrestleMania. But I don't know. I think they can always put on a good match. But despite this being like the return and maybe the comeuppance, I suppose that Sami Zayn went against Drew McIntyre. It didn't turn out that way, and it just didn't feel like it might just be because we had the CM Punk stuff, which felt huge, the Cody Rhodes stuff, which felt huge, and so it left our main event being like, well, it doesn't necessarily matter who wins this. I guess Sami Zayn can get his revenge, and then the way they ended up booking it is further, building Drew McIntyre to get the win, and then it really doesn't feel like it necessarily moved the needle for anybody.
And this is one of those things where we joked about Sami Zayn always being in the main event, always having nothing to do. There's something of over pushing somebody, and overusing. And I feel like that is what happened to Sami Zayn now, is people still like him, all that stuff, respect him, but his name no longer has that bright star, and Drew McIntyre is kind of in the same boat. So I agree with you. Gosh, if this is a WrestleMania filler, fine. But this isn't a match that's going to get really anybody excited unless you're a diehard Sami Zayn or Drew McIntyre fan. It was a good match, don't get me wrong.
Couple workhorses type of deal.
But this is what I dislike about these is you showed us the match. You're going to just have them run it back at WrestleMania, when it was just a main event of a Raw. That's kind of the hard thing for me to believe there too, is, how much more can they make it? How much more magic can they get out of these? And sometimes it works, but they're just two non-huge names, non-stars at the moment. I don't know. There were so many other things that could have been the main event for this Raw, and they chose to go with this one. I thought that was the wrong move.
Yeah, I'd agree. And maybe this doesn't last till WrestleMania. Maybe they'll have something else for them. Again, there is a pay-per-view in between those, or premium live event, in between those with Elimination Chamber, which is always fun as well. So we'll see. WrestleMania is always filled with either, a few of them are blood, blood feuds with long drawn out matches and stuff like that. I'm sure we'll get one of those. And then like Omos and Brock last year, some of them you can just throw together in a week, and all right, we'll see what they have for them. So we'll see where they go. I agree with you though. Zayn McIntyre, probably not a WrestleMania worthy. So I don't know. I don't. There's no good ending there for Sami Zayn. Unless he, maybe it's just further storylines for Raw. You eventually get him over, then McIntyre goes out and attacks somebody else, and you move on. But I don't know. Not necessarily the most intriguing stuff there at the end. But that'll wrap it up for our review there of Raw. We already reviewed Royal Rumble here on Nuclear Heat. We're glad to be back with you. We'll try to be back with you every week leading up to WrestleMania. And even after that, the Raw after WrestleMania is always fun. And then, like we said, the premium live event tied to after WrestleMania will be fun. It seems like there's never a boring week or boring few days in wrestling anymore. So probably have plenty more to talk about next week here on Nuclear Heat. Once again, I'm Jake Bakoven, your host of Nuclear Heat here on 93.7 The Ticket, along with Nuclear Heat contributor Augie Pena. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week.